All right, thank you, Catherine. It's day 2 of the Beckley-Raleigh County Chamber of Commerce's Future Forward event, and this morning was all about the upcoming election. Our Galen Markham attended the event's Meet the Candidates forum for the state, national, and district races, and she brings us more on today's hot topics.
The inaugural 2-day Future Forward event was designed by the Beckley-Raleigh County Chamber of Commerce to create conversations around the prosperity of the area. In addition to economic development, tourism, and education, the Chamber says one of the largest ways folks can help better their communities is by electing the right people to make it happen.
A lot of times people go to the polls and they don't know much about the candidates, and sadly sometimes people just vote on name recognition or popularity, and that doesn't help our state.
Wednesday morning kicked off bright and early with a Meet the Candidates forum for state, national, and district candidates. A topic on the forefront of the discussion was the state's current opioid crisis, how candidates will work to fix it, and their thoughts on the Foundation First settlement allocations.
We know that we have to do everything we can to take care of people that have substance abuse disorder, but we really need to focus, and the singular #1 focus of the foundation needs to be, how do we ensure that less kids, way less kids, fall victim to this incredible scourge?
These settlement dollars aren't enough. The First Foundation is a good first step in terms of solving this crisis, but we have to make sure this one-time opportunity, this blessing that fell from the sky of almost $1 billion, is used to solve the opioid crisis, or what we'll end up with at the end of those dollars being gone is an opioid crisis.
Another hot topic was artificial intelligence and its potential impact on future elections and small businesses.
I'm confident in our system as it is. My biggest fear going forward is actually AI, artificial intelligence, and how it's going to affect the elections going from now forward. I think it's a Pandora's box. We don't know how it's going to work.
We have to embrace it. We have to create models and forums and conversations like this. But don't pretend like it doesn't exist, because it's here and it's not going away. So we need to educate business owners of all sizes how to deal with it.
Other notable topics discussed during Wednesday's morning forum included how to increase voter participation, insights into decisions with the state budget, and even issues with the state's position on child welfare. Here for you in Beckley, I'm Galen Markham, WVVA News.
All right, thank you for that report, Galen. Earlier this afternoon, Future Forward also held a separate forum for the state's gubernatorial candidates. We're posting more from today's forum over on our website. Just head to WVVA.com.